Hi, I'm Dr. Hannah, and today I'm going to talk about managing the teenage years with type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed with type 1 at age 13 and had some struggles with learning to accept my diagnosis. And I think that's a foundation to creating a good relationship with type 1 diabetes. After my diagnosis, I went through a period of denial for about 6 months or so where I really was afraid to tell my friends, my teachers at school. I didn't want anyone to know I had type 1 diabetes, and frankly, I didn't want to talk about it. A lot of that had to do with my fears around what it meant in my life. I had so much unknown about what living with type 1 diabetes was going to mean for me in my current day-to-day and certainly in my future. I think that I had a lot of fears from assumptions or worst case scenario thinking that made it hard for me to think about and then certainly talk about, and definitely not something I felt confident in, which made it hard to share. And so what helped me so much get past that period of denial was going to a camp for children with type 1 diabetes and kind of being thrown into a group of kids my age who had been living with type 1 for a while, a few knew as well, but really watching how they lived their lives, how they were able to laugh and have fun and take care of their blood sugar and do the things they needed to do to stay healthy, but also how they were able to talk about it amongst each other, how I could tell they had a sense of peace with it, some of them, or it didn't have to be such a big negative thing in their life. It was extra things to do every day, but they were still themselves. They still got to be who they were and be these kids that are going through life with their own hobbies and fun things that they like to do. And so that really helped me, that sense of community, and many great examples from the children and also the people working at the camp who were mentors of what it could look like to be a young adult with type 1 diabetes, or what it could look like to be a professional with type 1 diabetes, or an older adult. I saw lots of examples, and that made a positive difference for me. But that wasn't all of it. I think that created a stronger foundation, but the key for me was learning to make peace with it and then practicing how to talk about it with other people. That helps create freedom around it. I think we feel really isolated or sometimes even sorry for ourselves if we feel that diabetes puts us in a position where we're choosing between connecting with someone else or taking care of ourselves. And so learning how to vocalize, hey, I'd love to, eat the cake at your birthday party, but I need to take insulin and wait a little bit. So can you cut my piece last? Things like that are empowering and make it so much easier to take care of ourselves. I think it's also important to have knowledge about what diabetes means for our lives. It's so easy to kind of internalize different limiting beliefs that we might have heard on a TV show or from somebody else who had a misconception, or just not heard the basics all the way through our diabetes educating kind of training in the beginning, and have a lot of limiting beliefs that are scary. And so it's important that teenagers understand that they can live long, happy, healthy lives, by doing the actions it takes to take care of blood sugar management. They need to know that they're not broken, that things can happen. They're not going to be held back in their career or in school. They don't have to be. There's a way to do type 1 diabetes and most everything they want to do in life. It's not going to change their ability to be loved by their friends or be loved by a significant other in the future. It's not going to change their ability to have children or have a family or travel. It might change what we have to do to get there, but it's not going to decrease our ability to live a full, happy life. And I think the more that we can understand that and really allow ourselves to believe that, the easier it is to move forward within the small actions of taking care of ourselves, because those are reminders of what's really going on big picture. In my older teenage years, I ended up, I joined the dance team in high school and had to learn exercise along with blood sugar management. And that was really challenging for me because I had a great endocrinologist at the time who I absolutely loved, but she didn't have as much knowledge in what to do around movement. And so one of the recommendations I got was just to go to dance practice less often. And that really wasn't something I wanted to do. So I felt on my own having to figure it out. And I think that was the first time, and there were many times outside of that or after that that I felt on my own with having to figure it out, that created a sense of isolation within me. And I took that on. I had such an incredible support system growing up, but I took on this sense of isolation, like, oh, it's up to me to figure it out if I want to do it. And it was a really heavy weight to carry as a teenager. And I can absolutely understand how some teenagers would just not carry that weight because it's the only way they know how to keep living and feeling like themselves. And I think that's where this kind of diabetes burnout, or kind of teenagers who choose to not do as many of the diabetes care actions, I think that's where it comes from, is the emotional weight is too heavy. And so really resources to help with that emotional piece, I think personally were the cure for me every time I felt burnt out with diabetes, to get back to a place where I felt good with it and was able to do the actions I needed to do. I did not go through a big period of diabetes burnout. I think once I learned the actions that I needed to take, and then being active on the dance team that was quite competitive, I think maybe my highest A1C as a teenager was 7.5 one time, and the rest of that they were low 7s, high 6s, and this was before continuous glucose monitors. I did have an insulin pump at the time. It certainly didn't have an algorithm. It was one of the old mini med ones that looked like a beeper, and that was it. I had a lot of lows. No scary lows, no episodes of DKA. So it's absolutely possible to live a life. I also didn't hold myself back from what I wanted to do. I would bake a lot with my friends, and we would make desserts, and it was before I learned anything about nutrition. So I would eat Oreos and go to Sonic with my friends on the weekend and eat fast food, and I was able to do all that. And it was really just the knowledge and the emotional piece of it that made a big difference for me. There's a huge importance for autonomy. I think that we can only have confidence at any age of life with ourselves and diabetes if we can trust ourselves to take care of it. And so not feeling reliant on our doctor or our parent, at each developmental stage where it makes sense to take on more, is really, really helpful, because when we can trust ourselves to take care of ourselves, that builds confidence that then snowballs in the right direction for feeling good with type 1 diabetes, and then ultimately not holding ourselves back internally from doing things we want to do. So that would be it. So in college, I internalized more. I definitely did kind of the full college experience of going to classes, studying late, not sleeping enough sometimes, drinking too much alcohol other times, eating, the free pizza at the dining hall, or, kind of different pieces. That I learned quickly didn't work for my overall health. And I think it was that getting really sick and just having a lot of struggle getting back to health after I got a big infection was hard for me. And that's where I kind of flipped into this idea of nutrition and lifestyle and health. Habits are so important because they make me feel better in my day-to-day. So I got that from that experience, but I was able to do all of those things and stay safe. And so I think that the reason I could stay safe is because I had a pretty strong foundational knowledge of, I know if I don't take any insulin, for 8 hours when I get sick, that's not going to work. I'm going to get ketones. I know that if my blood sugar is really high and I'm showing ketones, I need to focus on hydrating and getting insulin in me as soon as possible. I know that if my insulin pump site is feeling a bit funny, I might need to change it. I know that I can't leave the house without a low snack. I know that I can't go for a day trip without backup pump supplies or backup, injections. I know kind of all these pieces and these habits that I created that I think for me really built a solid foundation of a safety net that kept me safe through all the things that I did and I do now. I travel and I go camping and I do all these fun things. And so it's really two components for getting through the teenage years. One is the knowledge of what to do. And then the other is the ability and understanding that we're going to be okay and we can talk about it in a way that doesn't make us weird or different or isolated, that will prevent us from connecting with our peers and our community. And both of those are skills that we can learn, or things that we can cultivate in our life. So that's the good news. All these things are things that we can create for ourselves. And so I think that that's the big picture for me, is really looking at, do we have the skills we need? And if so, great. If not, where do we find them? Can we go back to diabetes education through our endocrinologists? A lot of people don't know this, but often insurance companies will pay for diabetes education again at a life change. So if that's someone going from middle school to high school, or high school to college, or a big change, obviously, for changing technology that we're using, an insulin pump, etc., we can get the full-fledged diabetes education piece again, where we meet with a diabetes educator. Not everywhere has access to that. Certainly not all insurances cover it, but a lot of them do, and so it's worth asking what's out there for you. There's also some great books that can help with blood sugar management. My absolute favorite, I've read a bunch, but the one that has helped me the most is Sugar Surfing by Dr. Stephen Ponder. I've talked about this book before. I'm a huge fan of him. He's also a mentor and friend of mine. But a lot of what I learned about how to take care of myself came from him, as he supervised the summer camp that I went to as a kid growing up for kids with type 1 diabetes, and then have been volunteering at for over 10 years now. So that's where I got a lot of my foundations, and it's great that he put it in a book to share with the world. So knowledge is important. So asking around, finding resources, taking time to do that in a way that doesn't feel shameful or like we're forcing something on ourselves because we're broken or wrong. But if we can approach it from a sense of curiosity, as in, hey, let's see if we can find any new tips or techniques or hacks, for making this feel better. I think that often is a better way to approach it, the knowledge piece. And then the foundation of our relationship with type 1 diabetes, and this is a personal opinion of mine, but I think it is impossible to get it optimized for each individual unless we know other people with type 1 diabetes. We have them as examples and mentors. We don't need to invent this, how to take care of ourselves and how to feel about diabetes. We don't need to invent that again. There's so many people out there that live great lives with type 1 diabetes, and you probably know a lot of these famous examples, like the Nick Jonas example. But finding people in your community, in your state, online, really just finding people to learn from, as far as this is how we can think about it, this is how we can feel about it, this is what it means, as far as I can decide that type 1 diabetes is going to hold me back from life, or I can decide that type 1 diabetes made me way better at understanding some of the health pieces, which made parts of medical school easier, and it got me, more easily where I am today. I can choose my perspective. There are a lot of ways we can choose a perspective. It doesn't just have to be in medicine, but picking one that feels empowering is so important. And then practicing with people we feel safe around, or with close family members or people we know love us, best friends, how to talk about this and how to advocate for our own needs once we've got that relationship foundation. Those are two of the tools I think got me through my teenage years in a way where I don't feel like I did any incredible long-term damage. I think I have no regrets about holding myself back in high school or college for things I wanted to do because of type 1 diabetes. And I think that's the goal. It's not just that we have well-managed blood sugars throughout these times of our lives, but it's that we get to live them fully. We get to get the full experience of what it's like to be 16, or the full experience of what it's like to be in college and be on our own for the first time and make our own decisions and choose our own friends. I think that there's a lot in life that is joyful and teaches us lessons outside of health management, and so we want ourselves to be able to do both as well as possible. I really think that type 1 diabetes has taught me so many hard and good lessons about life that have created who I've become and are pieces of me I'm really fond of now, and so I think that part is possible. I hope this was helpful. I know that the teenage years aren't always easy, and please don't compare yourself or your teenager to me. That's not what this is about. It's just understanding what's possible, one way it can look. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It really is just, creating one day at a time, one step at a time. What needs do I have that I'm not meeting, and how can I meet those needs, and using resources and community to fill them. So I hope that this made a difference, answered some of your questions about what teenage years as type 1 can look like. I'm sure there are more that will come from this video, so please put those in the comments because I want to talk more about this. I think there's a lot here we can explore together. Thanks so much. If you haven't already, liking this video and subscribing makes a big difference to me.